Hi my friends, nice to see you. Today I want to talk with you about how to take a really fantastic photo. So Saturday morning I thought, grab a coffee and let's talk a little bit about photography. Well, have you ever thought about what your photos decides from world-class photos? And yes, let's be all too humble, let's go into the full. I think it's always a good idea to compare your own photos with the real awesome photos of world-class photographers, because it's the only possibility really to see what is missing on your photos. And this is what I always do, and it really helped me to improve my photography. And I found out there are some key elements what massively improved my photography. And today I want to tell you the ingredients of a really fantastic photo. Well, first of all, we should define what is a really great photo. And you find a lots of definitions in different books of photography. And my opinion is, a really great photography is one which awakes positive emotions in the viewer. And the interesting thing is, there are so many elements there important. The technique, composition, all these things. Technique maybe not so much as many think, but there is one thing what really stands above all them, and these are the emotions. And to be able to awake emotions in the viewer, you should really think about your own emotions while you take the photograph. But it's not necessary to put positive mood into a picture. It could also work if you put negative mood into a picture, that it awakes a feeling of sympathy, for example, what also is positive. So you always should think about which kind of emotions, which kind of mood you want to integrate into your photo. So it's a good idea to think about emotions when you take the photo and think about which emotions could be awaked at the viewers. And it's also interesting that the most about emotions, usually when you don't think about it, is unconsciously. That means you don't think about it and you will get emotions anyway into your pictures. Whatever you photograph is a reflection of your emotions. And this means when you have a look at all your photos you have taken from the beginning of your photography, it's a story of how you felt in the different parts of your life. It's a little bit creepy if you think about this. But knowing about how it works really improved my photography. And the part with the emotions doesn't only work unconsciously, you can also trigger emotions. The easiest way is, maybe you saw my video from the giant waterfall a few weeks ago. I will link you above. Anyway, I'm not sure if I'm able to link a video in a video, it's my first time. If I'm not able, I will link it below the video. So what I do is, I try to get an emotional connection to the location, to the subject maybe, and I try to feel into this, and then I try to boost these emotions. The emotions maybe could be created unconsciously, but as I think about them, I can consciously boost them and use them for building my composition, for building the whole image. And this really adds to the photo. Maybe you have already heard from other photographers that first of all, before you think about your composition and everything around, you should ask yourself why you want to photograph the subject. And I think this is absolutely true. And the reason why I want to photograph a subject for myself are usually my emotions. And this is how it works. This is the first thing I do. I concentrate on my emotions. And after I am sure about my emotions, after I have understood them, what really takes time at the location, I think about how I will take the photo. This is, of course, a really important part, because knowing everything about my emotions alone will not give me the best photo. And there exists 4 key elements in photography which allows you to take a really fantastic photograph. And it's not invented by myself. This is something you find in many books about photography. So, and these 4 points are the technique, the composition, the light and the timing. And I'm convinced there is a 5th point, especially for landscape photography. I will tell you later. Let's go through the other points first. Well, let's start with the technique. Maybe when you have visited my website already, you found out that I'm a far relative of Gustav Klimt. This is this famous painter from Austria. For example, he painted The Kiss, a lot of other really famous paintings. And maybe you have already asked yourself, does this make him do a better photographer? And I can answer this in a really simple way. No, definitely not. But I think I have really an advantage through this, but what also can be used by you yourself. And I will tell you. Also, my grandfather was a homeland painter here in our region, and he was also a professor for art. I come from a family of artists, and I think this is the reason why I see photography more as an art than a science. And what I found out is that most photographers put too much emphasis on the gear. Don't get me wrong, the gear is important. It's an absolutely requirement. Without a camera, without lenses, you will definitely not be able to take a photograph. It's not possible. Think about big mood impressionists in the past, which met and talk about their paintings. Do you really think they talked about their brushes or about their canvas or whatever? No, I much more think they would discuss about their compositions, their colors, all these things, what are really relevant in a painting. And photographer is not so different from this. But today we talk much too much about gear, about cameras, about sensors, about megapixels, about dynamic range. All these things what definitely don't make a better photo. So you need gear, but you definitely don't need the most expensive gear. Please have a look on my gear list. I definitely don't use the most expensive gear. I have a full-frame camera, a Sony A7 Mark II, yes, but I don't use it anymore for landscape photography. I have some reasons for that. The sensor technology has got really great also for APS-C cameras. So I don't see a really difference for my vista photos, mountain photos, lake photos and so on. Maybe it's a little difference in woodland. My gear has not so much weight. When I hike up steep a mountain, I'm really pleased with a lightweight gear. And I also have some advantages with the depth of field with an APS-C camera. But don't get me wrong, my message to you is not buy an APS-C camera. My message to you is buy exactly that gear what you need for exactly your requirements. And it also doesn't matter if you use a Sony, a Canon, a Nikon, a Fuji. The technology is so good meanwhile. Choose the camera you feel best with it. I think much more important than the gear itself is the ability to use it in a right way. That means you should know which aperture to use, which shutter speed to use, maybe which focal length to use. All these technical things, you should be able to know which filters to use, or if it's not necessary to use a filter. All these things, but these are little things. This is nothing you need years to learn. So I think when you go out really often for photography, these are things you would learn within some days. It's really nothing complicated. And of course, I always will give tips around technique and so on in this channel, but this is definitely not a technique channel. I want to concentrate here how to take really great photos. So now let's come to the second part, the composition. And I think the composition is the biggest part of all these points. And I also found out that most photographers struggle exactly with this point. So it's not the best camera that takes the picture, it's the photographer who understands to build up the composition in the best way. What is the composition? Well, the composition is that thing what holds all the elements of your photo together. It tells the story of your photo. and also the emotions you should think before are part of the composition. It's also the way how you lead a viewer into an image. It's the way how you hold him as long as possible. It's a question of lines and shapes and balance and all these things. And if you have seen my previous videos, I gave already lots of tips about composition, and it's such a huge topic that I'm sure there will come so many tips around photography in my coming videos. And the interesting thing about composition is, whenever you're out, also when the conditions are not right, you always can work on the composition of your photo and come back later when the conditions are right. And this means the next really important point is the light. I read in many photography books that the best time of the day for photography is evening or in the morning, where you have low sun and the best light. But is this really the best light? Does it give something like generally best light? I don't think so. I think much more. The best light is always that kind of light what brings that mood into the picture, what fits best to the emotion you want to convey. And so it's not necessary only to go out in the morning or in the evening for photography. You can be out the whole day and take fantastic photos. If you have seen my first video, I will link it above, hopefully. I took a photo there which I'm really happy about. And I took it at noon. It was 1 o'clock in winter time. It means I took it exactly in that time where the sun was on the highest point of this day. And I'm really pleased with this image. And of course, the composition was really an important part of this photograph. We have all these triangle shapes here in the foreground, also the mountains back there. We have this path which leads you back and gives you a feeling of depth. This is all important. All these things are really important. But also the light was fantastic on this day. And as already mentioned, it was noon. So you always need really fantastic light, but this doesn't only exist early in the morning and late in the evening. Always think about which kind of light do you need, especially for that kind of image you want to take. And so there exist different types of light. It's all about the direction of the light and also the quality. Front light, for example, that means that the sun comes behind from you and shines in front of the subject, will give the best saturated colors to the image. Or light from the side will model your subject. This means it would look like more in a three-dimensional way. You get more plasticity through this and also more feeling of depth. And also when you photograph against the light, so when the light comes from behind the subject, you get the best possible contrasts out of your photo. So each direction has an advantage, and it's not possible to say that direction is the best or that is the worst or whatever. Same is with the quality. This means it's a difference if you have a cloud before the sun, what has an effect like a diffuser, what gives you a really soft light. And it's also a difference of if the sun is low or high. It's a difference. But the question is always, which kind of light do you really need for especially the image you want to take, especially for that kind of mood you want to convey. My recommendation for you is go out on different light and try to use it to your advantage. So the next really important point is timing. When you think about timing, maybe you think first on situations like action shots or something like sport photography where everything is all about the timing. But timing is also a really important thing for landscape photography. So for example, the light is one of these things. So for example, when you want to take a photograph of a calm place in the morning with a red sky, it will not work when you go there at noon, obviously. So you always have to think about when do you want to go there, but it's not only about the daytime. Sometimes you are out on location and wait for hours for the right conditions. For example, some months ago I was on a mountain around me and we had high pressure weather and there was air blown up the face of the mountain and the air swept over it, and I saw that there clouds were built, but we had high pressure weather, and this means usually there are no clouds built, only because it got blown up in the air, and so it swapped always a little bit of clouds over, but I needed the clouds a little bit more over that mountain I wanted to photograph, and it didn't happen for hours. And then it happened for only a few seconds. I think it was around 5 or 7 seconds, definitely not longer. I've been there with 2 cameras in setup. I released the first camera, then I went to the next, and they stood around 2 or 3 meters of distance, and I ran to the other camera and clicked, and I got these 2 shots. I'm really happy with them. It was the right timing what allowed me to take these great photos. Of course, the composition of these 2 images is really great. I'm really happy with them. But without these clouds, what come in front of the mountain, it would not have this kind of mood I finally got into the image. And I got this only through waiting there for hours for this exactly moment. So timing is a really important thing for landscape photography. So these were the 4 important key elements of photography, but as mentioned already, there is a 5th point, what is really important, especially for outdoor photos. What is landscape photography all about, obviously? And it's a point we talk really much about it, I think, but only for small talk purposes. We should talk seriously much more about this point. It's the weather. The weather is so important for landscape photography. It's a so big difference if you go out on clear sky or on a totally overcasted day or in a thunderstorm or whatever. It adds to the image, and it's the same as with the light. There is not a good weather or a bad weather. And it's really interesting. I read so often in books of landscape photography that the best weather for landscape photography is a particularly cloudy day. Obviously, it's the easiest weather to take photos, but I think the weather is so an important point because it allows you to bring these emotions you thought about before, and it allows you to add this mood you want to convey through your image. So my experience is each kind of weather is the right weather for photography. It only depends on which emotions, which mood you want to bring into your picture. You can take great photographs on particularly cloudy days. You can take great photos on a totally overcasted day. You can take fantastic images on clear sky weather, rain, thunderstorms. There is really no weather you can't get great photos. I think the only weather I would not go out is when there is an extreme storm. It's really dangerous to be there, or when you have hail or something like this, of course. But let's be honest, you also need some time to process your images and to plan your next photo tour, so you don't need to go out every day. And what I do is, I always inform the day before I go to a location how the weather will be, which kind of clouds we will have, if it will rain, and all these things, that I get an idea about if I'm possible to get this kind of mood, to get my emotions connected to this image I want to take, or if not. And if I think it is not possible, I go there anyway. But I put my emphasis more on finding new locations. I scout, I explore this area, as I did in the last week's video, for example. And what I also find interesting about the weather is that also the light depends on the weather. This means when you have a clear sky or a cloudy sky, the light will be different. And the weather also has an effect to your composition, because it's a difference if you have clouds in the sky or not, or if the sky is red or whatever. It is part of your composition, but this is also with the light, because when you have sunbeams anywhere through, this could be an important part of your composition. Also, if you have shadows, hard shadows maybe, or whatever, it also depends with the composition. So all these elements depends on each other. So excuse me when this video got a little bit too long, but I think these are really important points. If you build up a great composition, if you use a fantastic light, what fits to your kind of mood, to the emotions you want to bring into the picture, when you consider the timing and also the weather, you will get a really fantastic photograph. I hope you have enjoyed this video. Please share it with your friends. I were really happy if you could give me a thumbs up, and if you didn't have already, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much. See you next time. Bye.
I'm the landscape you need to see. You are the artist I'll never be. Stay with me and I have no doubt you'll make a painting that makes you proud.